Bear down, fam. 15 days to week 1, and today the Bears quarterback room got hit with an injury nobody saw coming, right as the backfield falls apart too, confirmed by ESPN. In a minute, I'll break down why this combo has me nervous. Kyler Gordon still hasn't stepped on the field, and Kobe Bryant might be facing a season-ending injury. The Chicago Tribune asked the question nobody wanted to ask, and Dexter Lawrence wrecked the O-line Thursday and forced a Caleb Williams pick. Windy City, buckle up. Okay, fam, let's talk about this with the seriousness it deserves, because I don't think the public reaction has fully caught up to the size of the problem building in Chicago. Tyson Bagent, the number 2 backup behind Caleb Williams, did not travel with the team to the joint practice in Cincinnati this week, and Ben Johnson confirmed directly that he's week to week. A source told reporters earlier this week that Bagent suffered a hamstring injury during last Saturday's preseason win over the Browns. He didn't practice Sunday, and neither did any other player who took part that Saturday, but he also sat out Tuesday and Wednesday. That's no longer a simple one-day precaution. That's a pattern of absence that's stretching out, and in August, with the clock running toward week 1, that kind of pattern starts to carry weight. Let me be honest with you about why this worries me more than it's probably worrying the average fan glancing at the headline right now. Bagent's absence means the Bears have to make other plans for their next exhibition game, and potentially the one after that too. Johnson has said he'll evaluate whether to play his starters based on how they look in the joint practice against Cincinnati. But the plan is for the starters to play heavily Thursday, which is a clear clue they won't see meaningful snaps Saturday. That leaves veteran Case Keenum as the top option to take the bulk of the reps if the starters sit. And here, I want to pause and give real context to Keenum, because he isn't just a name thrown in as filler. He posted a perfect passer rating of 158.3 against the Browns. That's outstanding for any quarterback, starter or not. But the problem isn't Keenum. The problem is what's behind Keenum. The only other quarterback on the entire Bears roster is rookie Miller Moss, who once played behind Caleb Williams at USC. Read that again. If anything happens to Keenum over the next few weeks, the entire depth behind the Bears franchise quarterback drops to a 23-year-old rookie with 0 regular season snaps in the NFL. My honest opinion here, and I know some of you will tell me I'm overreacting, this isn't catastrophic yet, but it's exactly the kind of situation a well-prepared front office shouldn't leave this exposed in the middle of August. I'm not saying Ryan Poles fell asleep, because building a 3-quarterback roster on a limited budget always involves trade-offs. But when you see the number 2 go down and the number 3 is a rookie with no real experience, that's where a fan has every right to ask whether there was enough contingency planning at that position. I could be wrong, and I hope I am, because if Bagent is back in a couple of weeks, this gets forgotten fast. But if his hamstring injury turns into something more complicated, which happens more often than people think with that type of injury, Chicago is going to be praying Caleb Williams doesn't miss a single snap all season, and this doesn't stay contained to the quarterback room. The death problem runs straight into the backfield, and that's where the story gets even more uncomfortable. Kyle Monangai, who was shaping up to be a firm RB2 behind DeAndre Swift after a solid rookie season, suffered a hyperextended knee after getting tackled by defensive lineman Grady Jarrett during the Bears' 14th training camp practice. Per ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, Monangai is expected to miss multiple weeks, though the MRI outcome was considered positive, which is really the only genuinely good part of this news. What's left up in the air, and this needs to be said clearly, is whether Monangai will be available for the Week 1 game against the Panthers on September 13th. He still has just over 3 weeks to recover, but nobody at Hollis Hall is offering any guarantees. In the short term, this absence opens the door for Roshan Johnson and Salvin Ahmed to get more first-team reps, and Ahmed in particular has been a consistent performer through camp and preseason, which is a small but real bright spot in the middle of all this chaos. But there's already talk about whether the Bears should sign an emergency veteran. The name coming up most is Nick Chubb, a 4-time Pro Bowler available on the free agent market at a value of roughly $1,300,000, the league minimum for players with 7 years of experience. Chubb isn't the explosive runner he was in his best years in Cleveland anymore. That needs to be said honestly. He played just 10 combined games between 2023 and 2024 due to injuries, and last season with the Texans, he carried the ball 122 times for 506 yards and 3 touchdowns behind an offensive line that, to be fair, was terrible. But he can still handle work near the goal line, and that's exactly what a ground game needs when its starting RB2 is out. Here's where I want to push my opinion even harder, because I think this connects to something bigger than just 2 isolated injuries. DeAndre Swift is coming off the best season of his career, 1,087 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns on a 4.9 yards per carry average, plus 34 catches. That's excellent, but Swift is still playing on an expiring contract, and the conversation about Chicago needing to extend him the same offseason was already happening before this injury. Monangai going down doesn't change that conversation, it accelerates it. If Swift gets hurt now, even something minor, Ben Johnson's ground game, which depends completely on having two real-level runners to function, is left with Roshan Johnson, Salvin Ahmed, and possibly a 30-year-old Nick Chubb just walking in the door. That's not a solid plan B for a team that's supposed to be in contention mode coming off an 11-win season. And look, this is the part where I want to be genuinely self-critical as an analyst, because just a few weeks ago I was on this same channel talking about how deep this roster looked compared to last year. And in part that's still true, the talent is there. But depth isn't just having names on a roster sheet, it's having names that can hold the level when Plan A falls apart. And in 3 weeks of August, we've already watched Plan A fall apart at quarterback and in the backfield at the same time. That already burned me once watching other teams. When you assume the depth will hold, and it doesn't hold at the exact moment it hurts most in October or November, when there's no more time to react calmly. Now, and this matters so I don't leave you with pure pessimism, because it wouldn't be fair to overstate this either. There's a genuinely positive light in the middle of all this chaos, and his name is Rome Odunze. After his new normal comments about his foot sparked real concern during the offseason, comments he later admitted he didn't articulate well, Odunze has left those doubts completely behind. Dan Wiederer of The Athletic wrote that after 15 camp practices, Odunze has 15 positive deposits into his 2026 development, and that any fear the foot injury that limited him last season would linger has completely disintegrated. Odunze put it plainly himself just a few days ago, honestly he doesn't even think about it anymore, that his foot feels amazing thanks to the work with the training staff. With DJ Moore no longer on the roster, Odunze steps into this season as the de facto WR1, and seeing him healthy and explosive in camp is exactly the kind of news this team needed in the middle of so much medical uncertainty everywhere else. So my conclusion on this first story is mixed, and I want to be clear about that instead of faking a certainty I don't have. The quarterback room and the backfield have a real depth crisis worth watching closely over the next couple of weeks. But not the entire roster is shaking at once. Odunze is proof that when the plan works, this team can be genuinely dangerous. And this connects directly to what we just covered. Because if the depth problem already worried us on offense, wait until you see what's happening on defense. Kyler Gordon was, until a little over a year ago, one of the surest things on the Bears roster. A disruptive nickel cornerback, capable of covering the slot and mixing it up against the run. The Bears trusted him enough to hand him a contract extension. That's not a small detail. That's real money committed long-term to a player the organization considered a core piece of its defense. Then, 2025 happened, and Gordon missed 14 regular season games because of 3 separate injuries. Not 1, 3. And here's the part that should genuinely worry any fan paying attention. After missing 14 games, you'd think the offseason program would be sacred for him, priority number 1. Nope. Gordon was out for the entire offseason program too, and he remains on the physically unable to perform list as training camp rolls on without him. Chicago Tribune columnist Brad Biggs asked the question a lot of people in Chicago weren't saying out loud, whether Gordon's commitment to getting back on the field has been at an appropriate level. And look, I get that questioning an injured player's commitment sounds harsh, but Biggs didn't pull that out of nowhere. He said it after watching a pattern of 14 missed games in 2025, plus that year's preseason, plus the entire 2026 offseason program, plus now a full training camp. At some point, the numbers start telling their own story, and that story is confusing at best. What strikes me the most is that it's not just me, or Biggs, questioning this from the outside. Adam Hoge of CHGO Bears reported on 104.3 The Score that there were valid reasons Gordon wasn't on the field early on, but that eventually it got to a point where everybody in the building is a little fed up that the guy's not out there. Everybody. That, according to reports, includes Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles themselves. And now, according to Herb Howard of the Bigs, even Gordon himself is frustrated, based on seeing him for just 10 or 15 minutes in the locker room. When Johnson was asked for an update this week, his full answer was, "There's nothing to add right now. There's a plan, and he's working toward the plan." That's coach speak designed to give the press nothing else to chew on, but it's also the 3rd or 4th time he's given basically the same empty answer. Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator, said he's hopeful Gordon returns soon, but when asked directly about his chances of playing in the season opener against the Panthers, he said that's not something he can put a lot of thought into right now. Translated, that means he doesn't know, and he's not confident it's going to happen. And here's where the story gets genuinely ugly, because Gordon isn't the only problem. Kobe Bryant, the offseason addition the Bears actually believed in, a Super Bowl champion safety who was supposed to stabilize that position, suffered a knee injury that could be season-ending before the season even starts. He went down during a one-on-one drill against Cole Kmet, clutching his knee, and the outlook since then has looked grim. That puts a massive amount of responsibility on rookie Dylan Thieneman, a first-year player suddenly carrying expectations that weren't originally supposed to be his. Tyreek Stevenson, the starting cornerback opposite Jalen Johnson, has been out of practice for more than a week with an undisclosed injury. And the player who usually battles him for that starting spot, Terrell Smith, is out too. Jalen Jones, who had been taking first-team reps while Gordon was out, has also been absent for weeks with an unspecified injury, which forced the Bears to give first-team reps to Malik Muhammad, another young player suddenly thrust into more pressure than anyone planned for him in August. Let me put it in simple terms. Of the 5 or 6 names you'd expect to see as the Bears' main secondary rotation this summer, essentially all of them have missed practice time at the same point. That's not one isolated injury. That's a real depth crisis at the single most important position for what's coming next. And what's coming next is genuinely scary. The NFC North, known for years as the league's toughest, most old-school division, has turned into an air raid. The Lions have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams, 2,000-yard receivers, plus a Pro Bowl-caliber tight end in Sam Laporta, plus Jahmyr Gibbs, who was third at his position last season with 77 catches. The Packers have Christian Watson and Matthew Golden, 2 receivers who already did damage to the Bears last year, plus an ascending tight end in Tucker Kraft. And the Vikings, even coming off a down year, have Justin Jefferson, who is simply overwhelming, plus 2 elite complementary weapons in Jordan Addison and Jawan Jennings, plus a 2-time Pro Bowl tight end in TJ Hawkinson, all of it now relaunched with Kyler Murray at quarterback. Jalen Johnson, the one healthy elite cornerback this team has left, said a few weeks ago that the idea of having to win 40-35 every single week is unacceptable. And he's right. Because on top of that, it's probably impossible to sustain across 16 straight weeks. Here's the number that should worry anybody who thinks this fixes itself. Even in a 2025 season where the Bears finished 11-6 and won the division comfortably, their record inside the NFC North itself was 2 wins and 4 losses. They allowed an average of 223.5 passing yards and a passer rating of 103 in those division games. That's with a relatively healthy secondary at the time. Now picture those numbers with half the group hurt. My honest opinion, and I know this might sound harsh, this isn't just random bad luck piling up. There's a pattern in how Ryan Poles has built this secondary, betting heavily on players with complicated medical histories. Kobe Bryant comes in with a history. Gordon has been essentially unusable for a year and a half, and this isn't the first time this front office has bet on talent with medical risk, hoping the bet pays off. Sometimes it does. Right now, it isn't. I could be wrong, and I hope I am, because if Gordon comes back healthy in the next couple of weeks and Bryant somehow avoids surgery, this analysis ages badly fast. But if those 2 conditions don't happen, if Gordon is still on PUP heading into September and Bryant ends up on injured reserve, Dennis Allen is going to have to solve, with Thieneman, Muhammad, and backup depth, a problem no other defense in this division would want to face against that kind of receiving talent. And to close things out, let's go to the offensive front, because Thursday was a wake-up call that Ben Johnson had literally already told everybody was coming. After the 34-10 win over the Cleveland Browns last Saturday, Johnson told reporters this week would be crucial for his offense to measure itself against the Bengals' new look defense. And he wasn't speaking generally. He was speaking specifically about one acquisition, Dexter Lawrence, the 2-time All-Pro defensive tackle Cincinnati landed in a trade. And on Thursday, in the joint practice, Sexy Dexy was felt on every snap. Per Sean Hammond of the Chicago Tribune, Lawrence made a big impact on the Bears' rushing attack, which was already missing Kyle Monaghan, the same injury we just talked about a moment ago, but the harder hit came through the air. Pressure Lawrence generated from the interior forced Caleb Williams into an interception, picked off by Bengals cornerback Jalen Davis. Hammond described it plainly on social media, pressure from the inside. Again, tough day for the interior, but Ben Johnson will certainly be excited to learn from the tape. That last part matters, and it's not sarcasm on my end, it's literal. This kind of hit in August is exactly what a joint practice is for. Nobody wants to see it, but it's far better to find these problems now against a real opponent in a controlled setting than to find them in week 1 when there's no more room to adjust. That said, there's real context behind why the Bears' interior offensive line looks vulnerable at this point in camp. Garrett Bradbury is set to start the season at center after Drew Dahlman retired. That's a meaningful change at the heart of the protection. The center is the one making protection calls, identifying blitzes before the snap, coordinating real-time adjustments with the guards. Bradbury has experience in the league, but he isn't Dahlman, and that kind of continuity doesn't just replace itself because the depth chart says center. What makes this moment particularly valuable as an evaluation is that the starters didn't play against the Browns on Saturday. Johnson sat them on purpose. That means Thursday's practice against Cincinnati was essentially the first time this preseason Chicago got to see its full starting offensive line facing real pressure from a quality NFL front. And the result was Lawrence mauling them. Williams did have some long completions. That's worth saying, honestly. This wasn't a total disaster from start to finish. But the story of the day, the one every reporter on site agreed on, was Lawrence dominating the interior. My honest opinion on this last story, to close out the episode, of the three things we covered today, this is the one that worries me the least. And I want to explain why clearly instead of just saying it. One bad practice against an elite interior tackle in August isn't the same as a full-blown depth crisis at two entire positions. Bradbury is going to get more reps to adjust, and Johnson is going to have Saturday's game against these same Bengals to confirm whether this was a one-time blip or a real pattern. If the pattern repeats Saturday, that's when the alarm would genuinely start ringing for me. For now, to me, this is exactly what training camp is designed to expose, the weak points, before they count on a real scoreboard. That's everything I've got for you today, fam. And look, I know this episode carried a warning tone from start to finish. Bacon's injury, on top of Monagai's, left the quarterback room and the backfield thinner than anybody wanted heading into August. The secondary is broken at a terrible moment, with the entire division turning into an air raid. And the interior offensive line still has to prove it can hold protection against quality fronts. But here's my real connection between all three stories, and this is the idea I want you to walk away with. This training camp isn't about whether the Bears have talent, we already know they do. It's about whether the depth Ryan Poles built, or didn't build enough of, holds up when Plan A falls apart. So far, on three separate fronts, that depth is being tested at the exact same time. And we don't have the full answer yet. What we do have is a healthy Rome Odunze, a Caleb Williams still making explosive plays even on a rough protection day, and a team that won 11 games, and the division last year with more uncertainty than it's carrying now at several key positions. I could be wrong, but I'd rather see this as a hard August than a sign of collapse. We're going to know a lot more by Saturday. Bear down, always. If this video gave you something, drop a like, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments what worries you more, Bacon's injury or the broken secondary. I want to read every single answer. See you in the next one.